You're stepping into the evaluation framework for the Toyota and Rainbow Push Scholars Activation. One specific metric you'll use is Audience as a System, or AaaS. It carries a 25% weighting of a team's total perfect score. Evaluators often instinctively reward emotional heat. In a high-stakes environment, it's easy to be swayed by the theatrical energy of a charismatic performer. The AaaS framework treats the room as a system engineered to produce a single output, a decision. Your position shifts into the mechanics of that system. Systems require specific inputs to function. For a presentation to succeed, it must provide the data necessary to move the system from a state of uncertainty toward a point where a decision becomes possible. This model represents the transition. Judging becomes an exercise in measuring the objective reduction of uncertainty rather than the subjective search for polish. A pitch seeks a signature or approval through persuasion, essentially requesting movement before the room has reached its own conclusion. But a presentation operates by dismantling uncertainty, allowing the room to reach an actionable decision on its own terms. Avoid penalizing a team for lacking a charismatic sell. This diagram represents the room as a processing unit. To switch the gate from uncertainty to action, the system must ingest 5 specific data streams. You will score these inputs on a scale of 1 to 5, ranging from emerging to exemplary. If one channel fails to provide data, the entire system remains stuck in a high uncertainty state. The first input vector is authority. This measures the team's ability to frame a request that this specific room is empowered to grant. A common system error occurs when a team makes a vague request, hoping the evaluators simply like the idea without defining the next step. A system-verified input looks like an explicit request to fund a 90-day pilot, or a request for a direct connection to a regional dealer network. Listen for whether the team correctly identified the exact limits of your room's power. Without that specific target, the system lacks the parameters to output a yes. The second input is incentives. Corporate value varies depending on the observer. Scholars must translate their project into the specific priorities of Toyota and the Rainbow Push program. Generic market benefits are insufficient. The team needs to map their outcomes to the specific metrics that your room is measured on. Verify if they are speaking your language or if they remain trapped in their own internal vocabulary. A project only gains approval when the proposed incentives align with your operational mandates. The third input is risk exposure. Every affirmative decision introduces new risk into the system. Teams often believe that hiding risk makes a project appear stronger to evaluators. Omitting risk actually causes uncertainty parameters to spike and erodes operational trust. Naming the downside immediately builds operational trust. It allows the system to clearly process the reality of the proposal. Look for immediate mitigation strategies paired with every risk mentioned. Ignoring risk is a failure of the model that prevents an actionable decision. The fourth input is constraints. This measures whether the solution can survive contact with real-world physics. They must analytically account for budgets, factor in strict operational timelines, and navigate complex regulatory frameworks. The AaaS metric rewards models grounded in reality, rather than theoretical concepts that bypass operational boundaries. Evaluate if the team understands the friction their solution will face upon deployment. An idea built outside of systemic constraints is unfundable and receives a low score for actionability. The final input is context, answering the question, why now? A sound idea is insufficient if it exists in a vacuum. The system requires a case for temporal relevance. Determine if the proposal addresses the specific urgency of the current organizational moment. Ideas lacking a tether to immediate market pressures fail the context check. Look for the complete architecture: authority, incentives, risk, constraints, and context. When all 5 inputs are satisfied, systemic uncertainty drops below the critical threshold, making a decision inevitable. The AaaS score is independent of the technical merit of the solution. A team can engineer a brilliant prototype and still fail to register a functional room score. If the system leaves impressed but unsure of what was asked, the presentation has not met its operational purpose. Run the clean test at the end of every evaluation. Ask yourself, do I know the exact decision requested? Do I understand the risk? Do I have the authority to make the call today? A yes to those questions requires an exemplary score, regardless of the prototype's physical polish. Score only whether the room has been empowered to output a decision.